Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the Invictus Games Conversation on Sustainability. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to COBCO and the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust for spreading the word and inviting you all here this afternoon. Thanks very much in advance to the home team at the Invictus Games Foundation, Naomi and Hannah and Sam, who've helped in the setup and the running of this webinar. It certainly wouldn't be left to me with my IT skills. So thanks very much to those guys. But the biggest thanks of all goes to our speakers. Who will be joining us shortly. They have given their time and their energy this afternoon voluntarily in order that they can share their experience. Nobody coming onto this webinar is claiming to be an expert. Maybe James Cameron will, I don't know, but certainly nobody is. So please appreciate that they're giving their time and energy voluntarily for the benefit of this community in the spirit of sharing. And that spirit of sharing experience and ideas is certainly what we're trying to do at the Invictus Games Foundation by facilitating a forum such as this. It's part of an ongoing series entitled The Conversation. Please watch this space. There will be more iterations in the coming months. So the subject of today's webinar is all about sustainability. Now, I'm probably not the first, and I'm certainly not going to be the last to say that we are living in strange times. We're living in uncertain times. We're living in unprecedented times. Choose your zeitgeist catchphrase as you will, and insert as required. And obviously, this breeds quite a lot of anxiety in the present with regards to delivery. How do we change what we do? How do we change our business in order that we can keep supporting the people that we want to support? How can we deliver what we said we would deliver in a changing operating environment? And anxiety about the future, especially with regards to fundraising. How is this going to change how we survive in the future? Obviously, there's the operating environment with regards to COVID-19 and the effects that has had, as I say, on the operating environment and also in the fundraising environment, but also the changing requirements of the cohort that we support. We're moving further and further away from the conflicts of Iraq and Afghanistan. Is there a change in requirement? And if so, how do we adapt to that? That's not the subject of today's conversation. It's much more general than that. But I'm just noting that things are changing, and we have to react to those changes. We can't stagnate. We must evolve with changing situations. So the aim of today's webinar really is not to come here with all the answers and say, look, this is how everyone can become sustainable, because frankly we don't have them. We don't have all those answers, but rather the aim is to promote thinking, to share experiences, and with the hope that this might provoke ideas in other organizations, that they can take what they value from the webinar and leave which doesn't apply from them, but hopefully it will provoke some ideas, and all ships can rise in the tide. We've got 4 incredible speakers today. I'm really excited about the webinar, very excited about introducing these speakers. First up, we're going to have Naomi Adey. Naomi is part of the home team. She's from the Invictus Games Foundation. She's going to talk to us about considerations for granting. Then we've got Dr. Richard Cullen. He's from Depth Therapy. He's one of the founders of Depth Therapy, and he's going to talk about consolidation and how to focus in on our key objectives within organisations. And then James Cameron from Mission Motorsport, he's going to take a different view. He's going to look at innovation and diversification. How can we radically change in order to stay relevant and be innovative and evolutionary? And finally, Louise Goldsmith from Hidden Valley Bushcraft. She's going to talk about commercialisation. This is a really interesting subject, something that I've spoken to a few guys across the sector about. How can we use the assets that we already have and commercialize them so that the commercialization of that can then fund the thing that we're passionate about? How can it fund support and delivery of services to the armed forces community? So that's coming up with Louise last thing. In terms of format, we're just going to rattle through those presentations. Each of those presentations is going to be about 10-15 minutes max, so it's going to be quite quick. We're going to follow through straight through one after the other in terms of those presentations. Please hold those questions because after the presentations we're going to have a panel session. So we're going to invite all the speakers back onto the panel once they've gone through their presentations. We're going to invite them all back, and that'll be your opportunity to fire some questions at them and really sort of squeeze them for information so that we can get the most out of this webinar. However, please don't hold your questions until the last minute. Fire them onto the chat bar as soon as you've got them, as soon as they come into your mind. Put them on the chat bar, and that'll help me out when we come to the panel session, and I can start listening them as we go along, rather than trying to read them all quickly and speak at the same time. I am but a man. I can only do one thing at once. So please do fire them onto the chat bar as soon as you think about them. Whilst we're on the chat bar, please feel free now to start introducing yourself. Say who you are and where you come from. You know, all the good Cilla Black stuff. Who you are, where you come from, and perhaps what you're hoping to get out of the webinar today. That would be super. In terms of follow-up, I promise there will be some cool follow-up from this. We will, if you've attended this and you've provided your email address, we'll fire around an executive summary, some of the key points, some of the key questions, some of the key findings, and the takeaways. There'll be a few links which are fired out in people's presentations. We'll make sure those links are on the follow-up as well. So don't worry if you've got to scribble down the URLs. Don't worry about that. We'll put all the links in the follow-up email as well. And the final thing, please can you fill in the survey at the end? There will obviously be a survey that comes round. Last thing, and it will be as you close down the webinar, right at the end. The survey should, fingers crossed, should spring out automatically. If you could answer it there and then, that would be brilliant. Just because it's all fresh in your mind and it won't be forgotten about. And that just means that we can take that feedback and take what's great, repeat what's great, and leave out what's not so great in the future. So hopefully it'll be beneficial for everyone. So without any further ado, in terms of housekeeping, etc., it is my pleasure to introduce Naomi Adey. Naomi is the grants manager at the Invictus Games Foundation, and she's going to just give a few tips, a bit of advice about considerations for granting. Over to you, Naomi.
Hello, everybody. Let me just press this. Technology is always the worst thing. So hi all, thanks for coming. I noticed that quite a few of you are from Scotland and Wales, and I think we've got a couple from Northern Ireland. So some of this presentation is based on England government and also councils. I'm pretty sure that you guys will have the same in your own countries, but if anybody does want any help, it's not my expertise in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, but I can sure help you find out anything that's relevant. The current situation within the military charity sector is we were already changing pre-COVID, and now many military organisations find themselves under more strain to find funding to sustain projects. So many organisations are looking to grant making charities to find that, but there are a number of local organisations, groups, councils, government initiatives that many may get overlooked. So I'm just going to go through some of those and see, just make you aware of some things that you might not be within your local delivery areas. So something that's quite successful local sports groups and teams, and maybe for lots of community projects, are grants that are available from supermarkets, banks and building companies. So these grants, basically you apply either direct in the store, they'll have a communities manager, or on the national websites, and you apply to be one of, it's normally 3 charities that go head to head to win between £500 and £2,000 with the little tokens. I myself have used this for my para ice hockey team. It's very successful. We got a nice little £1,000, which paid for quite a bit. So I would say this is a really good way to also promote your organisation within your local community. There also are quite a few local council grant funds. Again, if you go on the council websites, they will list the actual council funded programmes that are there that you can apply to. And the other really good one that often gets forgotten about is local companies with a corporate social responsibility policy. Basically what that is the company put aside money to give to local projects. This is a really good way to get a organisation interested in your organisation. Again, they might fund part of a programme or your organisation, and normally there is opportunity to apply again the following year. So something again that I've used quite a lot is the community foundations. There is a national website, but if you look locally, you will find a local one. I've used Cambridge as an example because it's quite local to me. So basically, what the community foundations do is they will bring together all the grants, all the people who are offering assistance to organisations in one area. Cambridge itself, you apply direct to the community foundation, and they then assign you which grant fund you fit into. So not only is that taking a lot of weight off you, that's also helping you start this really great relationship with local community organisations that, again, they will email you or they will phone you once you have that relationship and tell you potentially about new grants or organisations that are giving out money. So I really recommend the community foundations. The National Lottery and Sports England. So obviously Sports England is just for sports activities. Many of our endeavours have been lucky enough to get either a small or a large grant, but the National Lottery Fund often gets overlooked. What I will suggest with the National Lottery Fund is when you read the T's and C's, really read them, and if you're still think, oh, actually I'm not sure if we can apply, just pop them an email and ask the question. I know quite a few of our endeavours who recently have been successful in gaining funding, emergency funding from COVID through this. You can gain corporate sponsorship. So a lot of people think that they need to gain corporate sponsorship for an overall organisation, but what about an organised just for a part of your project? Again, this is getting local engagement if you've got local organisations, but again, you could look nationally, although that is harder because more people are going for that smaller pot. So I would, if you've got quite a local company, for instance, in Peterborough, BGI sponsor quite a lot of local organisations. So going on to trust and foundation funding directories, again, they will collate national funds that are there. They'll collate trusts. It's a bit of a one-stop shop. It can be a bit daunting because you do have to have a lot of time trawling through these websites. So I would say try locally first. I also would say just make sure that you read the eligibility criteria for a lot of these funds, because sometimes you put a lot of effort in applying for a fund and actually you're not eligible, so that's something to be wary of. One thing I've suggested to a few organisations is looking at gaining somebody qualified as a SAFA caseworker. So this not only can give you access to the CMS system, which you can apply for funding for many of the regimental associations and larger military charities, but this actually enables you to fund individuals from regiments to do qualifications, or if they need help with brown and white goods, or if they sometimes need mental health support, the regimental associations can fund this. It is normally for individuals on courses, but it's definitely something I would recommend looking into. The other thing which seems to be almost forgotten for many organisations is getting in touch and making contact with your local armed forces champions within the council and the Job Centre Plus. Not only within the Job Centre can you be of assistance as an organisation to somebody who potentially is unemployed or struggling, but again, these local armed forces champions, if they know of funding that's available and you're already friends with them, you may get the information before somebody else. So it's definitely something that I would recommend in doing. I've listed a number of useful websites here. They are all ones based for grant funding available, and also assistance on policies and HR and volunteering. And I really would suggest that people, if you're an entirely volunteering organisation, these are really good resources for you to use and are free of charge. So I just put a few things here to remember while you're going for grant funding. First and foremost, you must always make sure you look at the T's and C's for the granting, and are you eligible? It seems pointless of you applying for a fund, you're taking so much time, and then you are not actually eligible, so you've put all your efforts. So just drop them an email or a phone call just to check before you apply. Another really big thing is, what are the reporting requirements attached to those grants? If you are a smaller organisation, the reporting requirements might actually be quite large and time consuming. So you need to ask yourselves, do you have the resources available to do that? This sometimes, might be a question for yourselves, as actually you haven't got the resources available, so you can't apply for that grant. So for each grant funding, you will have to supply evidence. So it's really important that you guys collate the impact, the need, the effectiveness and the resources of your programs. This is what grant funders really, really want to understand in your grant applications. So it's really important that you have a portfolio of quotes, of things that have gone really well, and you are an effective organisation in what you are delivering, and you can evidence that. If you go for corporate sponsorship, you need to ask yourself, a large sponsorship deal requires somebody to lead it. Again, do you have the manpower? It takes time and resource. So again, this might be where a smaller company in your location of delivery might be better than going for a national organisation. It's also really important that the companies and organisations that you're approaching really fit in with your vision and what you're trying to achieve. There's always something a bit strange when you see an organisation attached to a company which has no relevance. So I would suggest making sure that those organisations align with your vision and that you get something just as much as they do. I would really advise you all to consider looking at getting a volunteer grant researcher. So all that means is that individual will trawl the Trust and Foundation websites for you, trawl the council websites for you once or twice a week, just looking at what's available, collating it all, and then you guys can make a decision about who actually applies for those funding. It just saves a little bit of time, but it also means that there's one designated person trawling through the mountain of funding that's there and available. I will send that all out and on the follow-up emails, and if I can help anybody further, please do email me and give me a shout.
Thanks so much, Naomi. Yeah, there were some questions there in the from Finola actually in the chat there, Naomi, asking for that information to be sent out. So obviously some pertinent points there for many. So thanks very much for that presentation. Again, if you've got any questions for Naomi, please stick them in the chat now, but we'll answer them at the end during the panel. So thanks, Naomi. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Richard Cullen. Richard helps set up and run Depth Therapy, which is an incredible sports recovery charity that offers opportunities for wounded, injured and sick service personnel and veterans to engage in the sport of scuba diving to extremely high proficiency and qualification. He will tell you a little bit more about that, I'm sure, and then he will tell you about his approach to consolidation with regards to sustainability.
Hi, so I'm Richard Cullen. As David said, I'm the chair of Depth Therapy, and I've just put this quote up because I think it's really important when we think about the changes that we need, and I'll come on in a second to how we've identified these changes. But there's a danger being the founder of an organisation, especially if you're successful, that you think you're going to continue to be successful and you don't have to do very much with it. But our work's shown us that we do. If you've got earplugs in, the next bit could be quite loud. Okay, so that's how we do it. Just very quickly, we're a registered English charity and we're a charitable company. We're completely volunteer-led and run, so that means obviously no employees. We've got no business premises. It's basically run from my home and the dive centre we use here. In addition to the diving, we provide 24/7 support for those who psychologically need it, and our programs are largely based in Egypt. We are world leaders in what we do. We've taught everybody at PADI. You all probably heard about PADI, the world's leading diver trainer agency. We taught them in adaptive teaching. We advised on the writing of their manuals, and we're now writing world-class manuals and courses for our new training agency partners, RAID. Going back to that quote, there is a problem when you become successful. We won lots of awards, lots of national awards. First, totally volunteer-led and run charity to be awarded, in any sector, to be awarded the Trusted Charity Mark. So we've got a lot of stuff behind us which says what we're doing is right, but we also identified that things were changing. Last year, we looked at the pattern of giving and sponsorship. And as you probably might all know, there's 1,888 charities in the military sector. Most of those are small, and only 45 of those are in the £5 million to £100 million bracket. We're very much a small charity, which means we earn over £20,000 a year, £10,000 a year, and a maximum of 100,000. We've never got anywhere near the 100,000 yet. But what we did notice was a downturn in giving. Kipling hits the nail on the head. Times of peace and all things righted, God is forgotten, the soldier slighted. Obviously, people haven't seen pictures now of soldiers being repatriated through Wootton Bassett. They've not seen pictures of young men and women with devastating injuries. So for a large extent, since 2014, the landscape has actually changed for giving. We started to ask ourselves some questions. Had we grown too big? We started off with maybe 5 or 6 people going on one of our programs. Last June, we had 26. And demand was exceeding program availability. Now, part of that was demand from funders. So we were going to people saying, give us money to run one of our programs. And people were saying, how many people do I get for that? We started seeing evidence that instead of being a developmental opportunity, which we're very much about, so it's not just a one-off, come drive in, learn how to dive. We try and develop people. And we started seeing evidence of people who basically just wanted to come away on a scuba diving holiday rather than be in the developmental process. The larger numbers started to diminish our family ethos, which is very important to us. And then we started seeing, which I suppose confirms point one, quite a high dropout rate. So people would do the open water course and then they wouldn't be available to come back and do the advanced open water course, etc. We also, when we looked at it, had a completely changing population. So I think David touched on this about Afghanistan and Iraq. 2014 to 2019, mainly young service personnel, pretty much all single, not in employment. Most of them had massive devastating injuries and were financially pretty well off. And then in 2019, we started seeing a change. So the people applying were becoming older. We still do get some Iraq and Afghan veterans, but not very many. Most were pre-Iraq and Afghan. They were largely partnered with children. Most of them were working, and we saw a massive rise in PTSD and mental health cases, up now to about 90% of those that we deal with have mental health issues. And we've seen an increase in applicant fallout. 60% of those who claim they have PTSD on application, once we ask for medical evidence, you suddenly never hear from them again. And we do have a high medical rejection rate because scuba diving means there's increases in pressure. If any of you scuba dive, that pressure affects how medication actually works. So lots of people can't dive with us because their medication regimes are unacceptable, and others, certain conditions, let's say like epilepsy, are contraindicated to diving straight away. So we have quite a large applicant fallout rate. What was our response? It was to go back to smaller programs. That's one, to meet our need to reinstate the family ethos, but also the fact that we knew that we couldn't carry on sending 26 people on a program twice a year. Enhanced selection procedures. Two big issues for us now is there are a large number of charity hoppers, especially in, if you like, recreational activities such as sport. So we were seeing people who were hopping from one charity to another. Unbeknown to us, they've been with charities before they came to us, and then when their time had finished with us, we actually suddenly see them appear with another charity. We also encountered really quite a big entitlement culture. I'm a veteran, so I'm actually entitled to this, and actually demanding pretty much that people should come on courses. We decided we needed to go back to quality over quantity. With 26 on a program, it was far too many. And we needed to manage congestion. Now, congestion's developed from the change in the profile of our program members. So if I go back to 2014, largely young guys, as said, devastating injuries, not working, financially well off, we could actually say we'll run 2 one-week programs in a year and a 10-day expedition in a year, and all these guys have put their hand up and say, yes, I can do it. That doesn't work now because people are married, people have got families, and people are in work. So most of them are saying, I can only manage a week a year. So we needed to change how we do business. And we're looking for more collaboration. Collaboration with the bigger charities, I have to say, has been very difficult. They have their own ideas about what they want to do. We've been trying to encourage them to actually say, why don't you send people, if you're running diving activities, to us, because we are the world leaders. Then along came COVID. The impact of COVID on us, as I'll discuss in a minute, has been devastating. But I think for the sector, there is a huge issue. People had started to forget what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there's been a decline in income. All of a sudden, we've got COVID and we've got new heroes, and COVID's likely to go on for another year. So people are giving to health service charities rather than actually giving to the military sector. For us, we had an instructors development program in April, a core program in May. We had a 2-week eco course, which was funded by the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust in July. And we also had one in September. All those have been cancelled. We were hoping to run a program at the end of October, and it now looks as if there still won't be flights to Egypt when we were going to go away on the 10th of October. Fortunately, the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust has been very good. They've deferred the funded programs that we had from 2020 and 2021 to 2021 and 2022. So our big exhibition is in 2022. But this has meant we've now got huge congestion, because to go on those programs, people have to be qualified to a certain level. So we've got to find a way of actually getting them there without placing too many demands on them. We've come up with a 3-year strategic plan, re-engineering all the programs and expeditions. So we said we can't run large programs. We want to carry on until 2023, because this date's come up in a number of reports about giving will not improve until about 2023. So we said, can we sustain ourselves to 2023, even if we get no more income? And the answer is yes, we can. We need to effectively manage congestion, but we can run at least one core course every year. And we've got the Armed Forces Covenant Funds for our other events. We changed our training agency providers to better suit us. So we went over to RAID, because all the courses are e-learning, quizzes, exams, etc. And the people we've got joining us now are supported by the instructional team straight from the start of the e-learning through the Zoom platform. We've moved very much into a virtual world. All our board meetings now since March have been on Zoom. We have program members meetings on Zoom, so new people joining us meet us on Zoom. We've been running webinars and presentations on Zoom, running dive quizzes, etc. And all the newbies meet their instructor on Zoom. The marine biology courses, the eco courses, which are funded by the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. The lead, who's from Glasgow University, is setting homework online for program members. Everybody on the programs had free access to an eco-academic course. And we've set up messenger groups and on Zoom to support those who've got mental health issues. Naomi spoke about the National Lottery Community Fund. We put in a bid for money, and we're successful, and the idea of that is to purchase tablets and software so that people can fully access, program members can fully access all our Zoom offerings and online studying. And fortunately, one of our team works for Barclays Bank, and Barclays Bank Digital Eagles are completely supporting the system. They're going to do training, etc., for us. So we're looking to develop. We're working now with Police Care UK because our objectives allow us to do the same work we do for the blue light services. We're happy we can continue till 2023. It sounds a bit arrogant, but we have had to cut our cloth according to our means. So it does mean smaller courses. It might mean we do a bit less of that. We're continually searching for new sources of funding. And what we're doing is working very hard to keep our existing and our new program members on board with what we're doing and actually taking them forward into our new world. But I'll just leave you with another quote. This is what we did. We've stepped outside our comfort zone and we've got to start to change. We have started to change. We've got to grow and transform. And we're very positive that we can come out of COVID and we can come out of the problems of funding in the sector very positively and as strong as we were before. Thanks very much.
Richard, that was great. Thank you very much. There's been a couple of questions come in on the chat. I'll fire them into the panel later. If you've got any other questions for Richard on that incredibly informative and insightful presentation, please stick them in the chat and I'll pick them up in the panel later on. Again, moving on, it's my pleasure to introduce James Cameron, chap I've known for many years, and James set up again another incredible organisation called Mission Motorsport, the Armed Forces motorsport charity. I've heard him say in the past that he's seen veterans have their lights turned back on through the power of sport and specifically through motorsport. What's great about Mission Motorsport is once those lights have been turned back on, they have some incredible initiatives to help move them into employment and other holistic wraparound care for the guys that he supports. I'm sure he's going to tell us a bit more about that. And then he's going to tell us about how Mission Motorsport has been innovative during the recent COVID-19 crisis and diversified its delivery. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks very much, Wisey. I can't claim to be an expert on much. Particularly, I think we're all learning at a massive rate of knots as things are changing around us and the world is changing too. But where it also presents threat, it also gives huge opportunity. And post the situation that we all find ourselves in now, the world is going to look different, and where those changes have occurred lie areas of opportunity for people to be able to dive into. This is an extraordinary chance for organisations and endeavours actually to be able to shape what that future looks like for them and to make some changes and to really sort of step back and do kind of review, not only of what you do, but why you do it and how it can be delivered so that you build your own sustainable future. The things that I'm going to sort of talk about, there are a couple of bits and pieces, like Richard, you know, reflecting a sort of tempo of events that suddenly becomes brought to a standstill. Our Race, Retrain, Recover program is about running a sporting engagement program, particularly for those who are disadvantaged. Traditionally, that's those who are wounded, injured and sick, but also who may have fallen by the wayside, either in service or afterwards. A training program that is helping to bridge the gap between service and successful civilian life afterwards. And then links into industry in order to help support people into relevant and sustainable employment opportunities. And it suddenly comes to an end when you're suddenly not able to actually engage with people. And also some of the other issues that people are finding, of course, our fundraising is also kind of linked to a lot of our event calendar stuff. And therefore it presents a double whammy, not only of fundraising being taken away from you, but also your beneficiary audience has not gone anywhere. In fact, the fact that they're not going anywhere then starts to give them real issues. To get a whole sort of gaggle of happy people together in one place, you've got to look to kind of innovate in order to have that impact. And you're not going to get a bunch of people stood shoulder to shoulder doing that kind of thing in the near future. You know, the Invictus Games trials for Invictus Games Racing. However, that picture is now being shown on Formula E's website. And the reason for that is by taking a sporting offer that normally would be in person and at a location, and instead going, okay, how can we respond to this? And to take things online, to be able to use stuff that people with no expense would hopefully be able to access, helps you to join together community initiatives. And so our online piece sees regular racing both on PlayStation and Xbox. We've sort of reached out to a community through that. So you can access, you can look in, you can watch streams, you can be connected with those sort of chat nets of people chatting amongst themselves. And then at the pinnacle stuff, you've got guys going through to both racing in combined services, esports championships, all the way through to people appearing on the TV. As you're also seeing sporting providers working out how can they innovate in order to be able to do it. Not Formula E, who has this incredible growing profile, as it's that sort of next stream of motorsport coming online, took all of their racing products and actually put it online with virtual racing taking place, ran an entire series, but with guest driver slots available to allow them to bring in narratives that supported their piece. And it's something I'll return to, actually, is understanding how the changes are also affecting the outside world, and to look at actually where you can unlock something for somebody else that in turn works wonderfully for you and your beneficiaries, those that you're trying to help. And by adapting, you've got to work out actually whether, you know, for those who've done the military estimate in the past, you know, has the situation changed? That point where you get to the end of the pulling apart the thing that you've been asked to do, and you actually ask yourself, am I still trying to do the right thing? Am I still trying to deliver something that meets the needs of my audience? And to look at what that audience needs and adapt it potentially to the new situation that you find themselves in is particularly important. And I'll give an example of it. The Positive Pathways program for us also involved a sort of extension into being able to get people sort of into the great outdoors as an extension of one of the things that we were doing. A Positive Pathways bid that was written during the course of last year and was focused very much on sort of 24-hour camps aimed at veterans and groups of veterans to go into the woods and go and kind of enjoy themselves, is on a site on the edge of Windermere, and only really transpired during this year just what an incredible site it is. But it's blistered onto the back of the YMCA Lakeside, a £6.5 million development, which is incredible and has all of the facilities and the access to, you know, Windermere and all that the Lake District has. But the situation has changed for our veterans whose summer holiday plans have been comprehensively disrupted by coronavirus, and continue to be for anybody, you know, who's ever fancied going to Spain for the summer. And therefore, with a lot of families with their plans in disarray, we looked instead at going, actually, can we, within the terms of the agreement, communicate properly with Positive Pathways and our strategic partners in order to be able to deliver something that actually is more suited to what our audience needs now. Not in whole, but in part. So to start to deliver something because there's suddenly a need for it, to turn on sort of veteran 48-hour camps for families in order to be able to allow families and children to be able to go for it. And that communication piece and sort of through the strategic partners, I mean, this is all great stuff. It's brilliant stuff, but it also potentially could provide something that we'd never anticipated before. And it was through actually communication with Naomi, our strategic partner. You know, you end up talking to Climb to Recovery, and I know Joe's on this call, joining Neil Heritage, who's looking at running climbing courses across the UK and potentially solving some accommodation and basing problems for them, is a wonderful way of being able to use something in order to meet a new and difficult context. And that kind of thing, actually doing that sort of collaboration and cooperation is also where I firmly believe that the future lies. It is a very natural human response when you're put under tension, is that you draw into yourself and you actually become less collaborative. And I'd argue that what we need to be doing is exactly the reverse. This is where we need to be reaching out to others in order to be able to deconflict overlapping areas and to be able to look at collaboration and cooperation opportunities that can unlock fantastic things. I mean, clearly, when COVID struck, it closed down, it reduced in output and voice a lot of service charity stuff. And instead you see where the national need truly lies. And we pivot in order to go and look at that and then go, how can we apply ourselves best to helping this? And rather than try to replicate what others are doing, we looked across and sort of thought, how can we actually help in the effort of what others are doing? Now, we manage relationships with industry, so to help people into jobs, which gives us a useful contact list. And, you know, the whole business of being able to generate lots of cars is something we're quite good at. But in this instance, we generated an entire bunch of cars that then were used for a different charity, Team Rubicon UK, now React, in order for them to deploy across the UK in support of their regional coordinators. And those vehicles are out there doing all sorts of things, from helping provide testing in remote regions to care homes and lots of other tasks supporting that wider op React thing. React were very much the charity at the moment. That was their thing, the national response piece. And for us to be able to play a supporting role to them actually has improved and enhanced our relations with our sponsors, who also were sat back looking at how could they do things to help, but they lacked the links, or they lacked the ability to mobilize a bunch of people who could bounce across the UK in order to make those deliveries and to make things happen. And to be able to do that, not just, you know, with the likes of Mazda, we then end up rolling it out with other people too. I think actually has improved our relationships with our sponsors. And in fact, you know, Jaguar Land Rover are celebrating today the fact that they've just been re-endorsed as a gold employer recognition scheme member under the covenant scheme. And if any charities, organizations, endeavors who are doing sponsor management don't understand and haven't looked into what the Armed Forces Covenant can provide for you in terms of giving you hooks and opportunity to engage with an industry audience, then I'd really thoroughly recommend that you do that. And if there's any further assistance that you'd like, this is bread and butter for us, and we'd be very happy to help you make sense of how potentially that could work. And that communication piece, I've referenced it in every bullet point that I've talked about, but it is absolutely fundamental. By talking to your audience, the people who you're serving, they will tell you what their needs are as they change, but also understanding what your backers and sponsors want. So clearly, as you manage a grant agreement through changing times, then like depth therapy, the ability to go back to talk to Positive Pathways in order to explain how you will be delivering that agreed output through the grant agreement is incredibly important. But you'll also find sponsors are incredibly understanding too. And they may have their own unique problems, which you can actually assist with. We work with an organization called Team Sport, who owns 37 go-karting tracks across the UK. They've had an enforced closure of 133 days, which for a company is incredibly hard to be able to sustain. And they've got the opportunity to go back to working again. So we've helped that organization to be able to get their processes and protocols right. And we put time and effort into making sure that could be done entirely selfishly, because we have to do that for our own audience who we're going to send to those locations in order to be able to do go-karting. So it's something selfish for us, but for them, it allowed them to lean on some different expertise to help them to be able to get up and going again. And what we put in place with them is a way for people to be able to go-karting, to raise a bit of money for charity. And by using some of our sort of PR leaning into it as well, it's a different gag which they can use. Individual local centres can make a noise about the fact that we're open again. We're open for business. Look, here we are doing something with this great audience of military types. You know, come and spend your money because the UK is open for business. For all of us who are sat on the charity side, you're relying on funding to be able to come from elsewhere to some degree. And to be able to help those people who fund you, you will find that they will be incredibly appreciative that a charity giving relationship is not just a one-way one. And that sponsor management piece is only enabled through communication. It can also unlock some really weird and wonderful stuff. So I got, you know, sort of bounced into London on an opportunity helping the app Spare Hand, where we had a load of our guys out who were delivering PPE for the South Central Ambulance Service, who were making meals for the NHS, again through another Covenant signatory partner, who also wanted to publicise the fact that they were doing things in the centre of London, delivering food to impoverished families. So you know, you find yourself sat in the middle of that with a couple of Hollywood actresses. I was so the wrong person to get sent along to do it, but if anybody likes Catherine Waterston or Vanessa Kirby, I could be bribed in order to release personal phone numbers. But it is absolutely fantastic. So a piece of work for us, which was great. It was supporting another partner, but the knock-on for that for a sponsor to be able to do that, they valued it incredibly highly, and it was something that worked really well for them. Very different to what we had initially envisaged that we were going to be delivering during that period. And that's my final piece. But if there's one bit that I can really sort of drum into you, is that communication piece. Talk to the people who give you money. Talk to the people who support you, your partners and deliverers, and particularly make sure that you're having that two-way conversation with those to whom you deliver your piece, in order to make sure that you're delivering for them the most impactful thing that you can do in the most impactful way.
James, thank you very much. Certainly that piece you hammered home with it at the end there about communicating and just making sure you're communicating at all channels, to your individuals, to your partners, and to those who support you. That just, you know, it's so much common sense, but you know, it's certainly more difficult. But it's a simple thing, and it sounds like a really important takeaway point. So I've certainly noted that one down. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you. Sorry, it is the most natural thing to do when things become difficult, is to go, I don't want to talk to them about it because we're going to struggle to deliver X, Y, or Z. And actually, the one thing that you need to do is to be really open and honest and go, our context has changed, and you'll find a very willing audience.
And that's great. I think that's super advice. A really key takeaway point there, and it brings us on nicely to our next speaker, because that interface between you as a charity and companies working within the commercial sector sort of brings us nicely to Louise Goldsmith. Louise and her husband Nick set up and run a company called Hidden Valley Bushcraft. Nick is a veteran, a former Royal Marine, and after some difficult times in Sangin, in Helmand province, came back, took up a patch of land, and is used that for his own place to find peace of mind. But Nick and Louise are now using it for a commercial aspect, but they're ploughing that commercial gain back into supporting other veterans and their charitable output. And I think that's a super interesting concept that Louise is going to tell us more about, how commerciality can support charitable output. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, David. So good afternoon, everyone. As David said, my name is Louise Goldsmith, and along with my husband Nick, we run Hidden Valley Bushcraft and the Woodland Warrior Programme. Sorry Nick's not here with me today. He's actually running a corporate event at the Belmont Estate, but actually that links in nicely with my topic of presentation today, which is all about how we have commercialised our activities to sustain our endeavour. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about us today, our journey, and how we've tapped into the corporate world to secure the future of the Woodland Warrior Programme. So for those of you that don't know, our endeavour is, like I say, the Woodland Warrior Programme, which provides therapeutic activities for injured armed forces personnel, veterans and members of the emergency services. And all our activities are centred around bushcraft and the natural world. The Woodland Warrior Programme itself is actually its own community interest company now, but it didn't start off that way. But before I explain how, I think it's worth giving you some background information on the two of us. So both Nick and I had highly stressful jobs. Nick was a Royal Marine Commando and I was a police officer. And after several years in a recovery centre, Nick was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know why I can't say that. I've said that a million times before. And he was medically discharged from the Royal Marines. But fortunately enough, in 2012, we had purchased a small woodland near Bristol for us to relax and unwind. It was overgrown and hadn't been touched for over 30 years. There was no vehicle access, no electricity, it had no running water to the site. But Nick used this woodland to aid in his recovery, and we wanted to help others in a similar position. However, when we started out, we had no experience of grant writing. We had limited contacts in the field. And we thought, well, the best way we're going to do this is to set up our own company and then use the funds ourselves to support others. And that's what we did. We set up the Woodland Warrior, Hidden Valley Bushcraft, which helped the Woodland Warrior programme. So first of all, we had to start managing the woodland. We built a basic cabin. We built some paths, and we created our own little hidden gem, and we needed a space where people would want to spend good money to come along. And we built the infrastructure. We continued to improve the location and made the woodland interesting and practical. And we knew that if we could create a successful business, then we could use the assets and the profits of that business to fund our veterans programme. So in 2015, we set up Hidden Valley Bushcraft, and we became specialist providers of outdoor education and recreational experiences in a woodland environment. We started off with birthday parties, stag do's and corporate events, all very basic, but we felt like that was the easiest thing to start with to earn the money. And then to ensure that we had regular income all year round, we created a unique outdoor nursery where 3 to 5 year olds would come to the woodland in all weathers, 50 weeks of the year. And this meant that we had a source of income for the business all year round. It meant that the woodland, when the woodland wasn't in use for the kindergarten or other corporate events, it could be used to run the retreats for the injured veterans, and we used the business to cover the overhead running costs of the Woodland Warrior programme. And our veteran participants could then use the resources that we'd already purchased from the corporate events to run the Woodland Warrior. They could use that kit, and it meant that we didn't have to then buy duplicate kit for the Woodland Warrior programme. So we were able to fund many Woodland Warrior weekends through this method, which built our network and our reputation. And then in 2019, we turned the Woodland Warrior programme into its own community interest company. For those of you who don't know what a CIC is, it's a special type of limited company which exists to benefit the community rather than private shareholders. It's really, really easy to set up, and it's very much like a limited company, where you register on Companies House. The only difference is that any surplus funds must be redirected back into the company to benefit the community that you serve. So for us, that would be the Armed Forces community. This meant that we were able to apply for grants, but also continue to offer this to other groups as well to raise funds for our Woodland Warrior programme. But essentially, the Woodland Warrior programme and Hidden Valley Bushcraft are mutually supportive of each other. The Woodland Warrior uses the location, kit and equipment belonging to Hidden Valley, and Hidden Valley has access to the assets of the Woodland Warrior programme in order to generate future income. Profits from the corporate events are used to sponsor places on the Woodland Warrior programme as well. We're also in the process of building a cabin, which we are planning to rent out to the general public, so that the funding that we receive from that can then pay for places for veterans to come along for free. So we're really thinking about what we've got, what our assets are, and how we can use it to help our injured veterans. But for you, things don't have to be as complicated as this. What we have also done with the Woodland Warrior programme is allow key workers to access the programme, which has opened up other areas of grant funding for us. It's also reignited interest from the media, which helps with the brand awareness. And inevitably, they mention the work we have and continue to do with the veterans. So this has really ignited interest in our veteran programme once again. And only last week, Nick was talking on BBC Radio Bristol about the work we do with our veterans, all because we'd started a key worker programme as well. So that was really good. We also provide exclusive workshops for other charitable organisations. For example, we have a group of a team who work with vulnerable children. They're coming along to spend the day with us, and also Avon and Somerset Police Federation are paying for their officers to attend as well. And this all helps towards the running costs of the Veterans Programme and helps to make the Woodland Warrior sustainable for us. But corporate organisations, they love this type of thing as well. Recently, there's been a shift of focus for the corporate world. Rather than funding team building days, they prefer to fund wellbeing days for their staff, and the Woodland Warrior fits in really nicely with that. They also like to feel like their money is contributing to a good cause at the same time, so that's always a winner. Then you've got your stag and your hen groups who love all the adventurous activity, and the surplus funds from these events can easily cover the costs of a place for a veteran on the Woodland Warrior programme. Obviously, we don't allow alcohol, but not all stag and hen groups want to get on it on a Friday night. Surprisingly, there was no extra insurance premium to cover these additional groups, which makes it even more of a no-brainer for us to do that. So a couple of things for you to think about. Could you extend the programme to key workers and other not-for-profit organisations? And this will provide you with access to other grants as well. Could your experience be commercially viable? Perhaps the profits from a stag or hen group or corporate experience could sponsor places for your veterans. And think about what assets you've got and how you could use those assets to generate income to keep your projects running. But remember, you're not selling yourself short by tapping into the commercial world, as long as you don't lose sight of the reasons why you set up your endeavour in the first place. And that's something that Nick and I have never lost sight of at all. It really does run through us. We're never going to lose sight of that. The Woodland Warrior programme certainly wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Hidden Valley Bushcraft. Both are really intertwined together, and each are essential for the other's survival. So thanks for listening. I hope you've learnt something, and perhaps you could use some of what I've said and adapt it to your organisation. But please do check us out and follow us on social media. And we are actually up and running again for courses for COVID, after COVID. So if you know anyone who may benefit, please do get in touch.
Thanks very much, Louise. We're going to go into a panel session in just a minute. I'm just going to give a few summary points just so everyone can catch their breath and just get reminded what it was we were talking about. So first off, we had Naomi, who gave some fantastic signposts and guidance when considering grant applications and different avenues to focus on. Just in case anyone didn't see, Ian Cors from COBCO also put a handy link in the chat as well. Just to reinforce what Naomi was saying. So scroll through the chat and you'll find that from Ian. Thanks, Ian, for the contribution. Richard reinforced the fact that the landscape has changed and is changing, both in terms of issues pertaining specifically to the armed forces community, but also more generally, and especially sort of COVID related, and spoke about identifying your base. That's both in terms of people, who it is that you're wanting to support, and also your objectives, what effect you're trying to achieve through that base. Staying true to these, and the phrase he used was cutting your cloth to make sure that this base is supported and those objectives are reached. And I think the proof of the pudding there is Richard was sort of saying, they're good to run out until 2023. So there's proof of the pudding right there. James gave a different sort of approach with regards to being innovative and diversifying action. And I think that the key points that I drew out of that actually were about collaboration, and how through this crisis, James and Mission Motorsport have connected with other organisations in order to still hit those objectives in terms of supporting that base. So similar to what Richard was saying, identify the base, still hitting those objectives, but doing it in a different way within the current restrictions. And that was proved through the fantastic work that they've done with OpReact. And again, just to reinforce that point at the end, with regards to communicating, I think that was a key one that I've certainly noted down. And I think that the phrase to sum up James's presentation is sort of opportunity begets opportunity. He was sort of saying, you know, if he keeps changing there, more things would come up as a result. And Louise, just there at the end, you know, I think it's really great to see when something like this is working. And there's so many organizations across our community, across this sector, who've got some really cool assets that I think would be really attractive to paying clients. And I think there's a bit of bravery there, and I think Louise is probably a bit too humble to say herself, but there's a whole lot of courage and bravery in order to take that first step and establish that company in order to make best use of those assets and create a commercial product in order to again support that base and achieve those objectives. So staying true to them. But Nick and Louise, again, proof of the pudding. They're proof that and evidence that can certainly be achieved. And I think a great pointer there for anybody who's in a similar situation with such a cool asset like a woodland. We're not all lucky enough to have a woodland, but you know, we all do have some assets as organizations that we could commercialize. Is that formation of a community interest company. And there's lots of information on the central government website about how to set that up. They are pretty easy and they're pretty quick to set up as well. It's a matter of days, and it just gives you a bit more freedom to make money, but then plow that money back into the good causes that you set up there. So on gov.co.uk, if you look on there and type in the search bar for community interest companies, there'll be some more information on there. So some great summary points. Hopefully that's given our panelists enough time to catch their breath and gather their thoughts, as I'll invite them all back onto the screen. If you could all turn on your videos, turn on your microphones, and stand by for a quick fire question round. There's been a few questions come in across the chat net. Thank you for sending those through. I'll try and pick them up in the time we've got. We're doing okay for time. So we should be able to get through them. Naomi, you've had the longest time to catch your breath and gather your thoughts, so I'm going to be cool and go to you first. Thanks again for your presentation. So you talked about there about really focusing on grants and taking time and a really measured approach. Why not just take a shotgun approach? Why not just, you know, apply to loads of stuff?
Because that is a really silly idea to spread yourself so thin. During this time especially, you need to put all your effort into a really strong, solid, evidence-based grant application for the best chance to be successful, because every man and their dog will be applying for the same grant. So if you just fire out everything, one, you're not going to be able to control and remember who you've gone out to grant to, so it's much better to look at grants available, where there's finance available, and go, okay, we think this is our best chance, or these are our best two, and apply to two. But yeah, just I wouldn't recommend spreading yourself really thinly. It's not a good approach to grant applications at all.
So So really focusing on those criteria, the entrance criteria, really have a good look at those. I've seen a few, they're often pretty good on the FAQs, aren't they, about who should be applying for this, what it's for, and really focusing on those details.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if all grants will have the T's and C's and the FAQs, if you just read them, and if you're still not sure, like I said before, drop them a line, drop them an email just to clarify. But also, you might be given information from someone else. So, for instance, Richard and the National Lottery grant, they didn't necessarily think that they would be eligible, but after a discussion with myself and saying, look, actually I really think you would be, why don't you drop them a line, just to take that step and make that contact has actually resulted in them getting grant funding for something specific. So yeah, it's really important just to kind of not spread yourself really thin and really read up into, can you evidence what they're asking for.
Jim, did you have a point there?
Just really to kind of reinforce what Naomi's saying, the other thing you've got to be quite careful of is that you go out looking for money, but with those money tends to come different things that you're being asked to do as well. And you run the risk of, you look out, the situation has changed, I have a funding shortfall, I've got to go out there in order to make up that funding shortfall. You attract funding, but you've also promised to deliver extra things that you weren't originally delivering in the first place. And you then end up chasing the error of just an expanding remit of things that you're delivering for a wider group of people all of the time. And you actually haven't brought in something to fund what you wanted to do in the first place, which is what you were doing anyway.
So
and I definitely would.
Don't try and fit a square peg in a round hole. Don't try and invent new activity, because otherwise you're going to lose energy and focus on the thing you started out with in the first place. Is that right?
Yeah.
Massively.
Did you have something else to add there?
Yeah, and I would say, like, if you apply for a grant that has a strategic partner umbrella, use that strategic partner umbrella as that bouncing rod of your grant application. People sat within the strategic partnership that understands the requirements for that grant. So why wouldn't you bounce your first draft off the people that are there and get their hints and tips to make your application more successful? And you should never ever chase money to set new programs up when you potentially can't sustain the programs that you've got. So if that program is what your heart and soul is, fund that program, and just, it's all to do with getting the evidence and the reporting just to show you how successful you're being with the veteran community.
Fantastic, thanks. Just a quick one from the chat. We've got Gary who's invited all three charities up to Fort Cumberland to do some practical and visual presentations. So please look out for his email over at Fort Cumberland. Brilliant. Richard, you talked about congestion, and I know that you're consolidating and you're focusing on that base. So hopefully that'll help with your congestion. But also we know that travel is restricted, gatherings are restricted at the minute. So I'm assuming that congestion is going to be an issue maybe into next year. I'm wondering, how are you going to deal with this? And more importantly, do you think that this is an opportunity for deconfliction across the sector, especially with other organisations that deliver similar sports recovery type events? So an opportunity to deconflict, an opportunity to collaborate?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we're fairly optimistic that we'll be back into Egypt next year. The problem for us is just actually getting people onto the programs, getting them qualified to the right level. So we even looked at actually taking people diving in the UK, which would have cost us far more money than going to Egypt. The problem was that we just can't get them diving in the quarries because they're very limited at the moment. You have to be members, and our people come from all over the country. We've been keen since 2014 to work with other people across the charity sector, mainly who are big charities who run the same as we do. I'm not aware of any other small charities that run what we do, but actually nobody really wanted to discuss the issues, and they're quite happy if they could take us over and move forward. Yeah, and we're always trying to talk to people, and we've got discussions ongoing at the moment with another charity in the sector. So yes, there is room for deconfliction. There's a lot of room for working together, because there's money actually being spent that I don't think actually going to the right places to deliver the products that we can. So we're very keen to get involved with other people and move forward.
Well, that's great to hear, because I've got a couple of comments and questions from the chat. We've got Susie from Scottish Veterans Residences, and also James Stopford from the Not Forgotten Association. Similar points / questions, and Susie firstly wondered how people got in touch with depth therapy. Are you finding that your guys and girls are coming from self-referrals or from other charity referrals? And the follow-up from that was, you know, the people that they support up there at Scottish Veterans Residences, a lot of those guys are sometimes reticent about taking that leap as an individual to get in touch with an organisation such as depth therapy or any of these, and could there be an opportunity for collaboration in order to work with these individuals to help maybe overcome some of those reservations?
Yeah, I mean, lots come from self-referral. Others come from the fact that people we're already working with know other people and recommend them. But we do get a number come through other charities in the sector. We do work with a lot of people who are really hard to reach. I mean, we quite pride ourselves on that, because, as I say, you know, 90% of the people now have PTSD, and some of them have really, really severe mental illness. So we work with those sort of people. We've got people who won't even talk about their conditions and things like this. So we welcome anybody on board. What we have to do, and it can be a challenging process, because you know, scuba diving, although I don't agree, scuba diving is counted as high risk. Pressure does cause problems. So our doctors have to be, our psychologists and our dive doctors have to be 1000% happy that somebody would be able to dive safely. But if they go to the website, the contact's there. I'll make sure the details are available. It's liaison@depththerapy.co.uk. The guy that does it used to be a sapper, and he'll send out or people who have psychological problems and things like this. So we can, even if we've got people in the area, we can always go and talk to people about what we do.
That's fantastic. And one last one for you, Richard, because it was the follow-up from James's question from Not Forgotten Association. There's two parts. You mentioned there about guys obviously with some complex needs. Who do you partner with? Who do you send the guys to after they've been with depth therapy to give that follow-on and wrap-around support?
Right. So what we do is we do it ourselves and do it pretty successfully. We've got Dr. Richard Castle, who's sort of a leading consultant in psychology, who used to be in the RAF. He's our advisor. All our team go on mental health first aid courses. We've got a very strict structure about how people sort of are kept in line, and that the staff don't get under pressure with that. And we've also, everybody's trained in safeguarding, and we've sort of got little triggers when we would actually say somebody needs referring on to a mental health professional, and we would actually do that. So that's how we work on the basis. But we probably maintain about 15 guys at the moment on 24/7 support. So
thanks for that, Richard. I'm just cantering on. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to split that 5 minutes between our last two panelists. Louise, it sounds like you're doing some really great stuff there, and using the funds that you get from the day job essentially to fuel the fantastic charitable work that you do. Starting a business, pretty intimidating, I imagine. Did you find it intimidating, and what would you say to others that have those sort of reservations?
Well, I mean, Nick and I, neither of us have a background in business at all. You know, being a police officer in Royal Marine, no idea. So we tapped into our network of people that we knew. There's fantastic organisations out there, Heropreneurs being one of them, that can mentor you in order to start a business. There's loads of information online, and it's just, you know, having the guts to take that step. And we just thought this is the only way that we're going to fund our Woodland Warrior, so let's do it. And it's not that hard. You get a good accountant, tap into your network. There's loads of people that can help you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Louise. Sage advice. And Jim, final word. I think the final question goes to you. It's a tricky one as well. I'm sorry about that, mate. Richard talked about prioritization, and you talked about diversification. Are these two things mutually exclusive?
No, not at all. But you've got to cut your cloth appropriately to what you can deliver. And ultimately, the topic of this is around sustainability. And where a lot of stuff is changing around you, it's being able to just take a step back and look objectively at why you were formed, what it is that you want to do, how you intend to fund, deliver, and evidence that to your partners, and what you see that sort of that growth program being. COVID is challenging on so many levels, but it was also an opportunity as a catalyst for change. If there's something that you have now got the opportunity to take just a step back and go, actually, how big has our bang for our buck been in terms of spend, or in terms of staff effort, or in terms of love put into a certain sort of activity? How impactful has it been? And then be able to look around and go, actually, that gives me a different perspective, therefore, on how we're going forward. And also to be able to map out some incredible opportunities, to be able to go, if I worked closely with other organisations, if I brought partners in to do this, if I bring some commercialisation in, it is not necessarily a dirty word, and it would allow me to do what I wanted to do in the first place. So to the organisations out there who are all at different stages and sizes, who are trying to deliver programmes, the other thing is, I think we can learn an awful lot from each other. And the point which has been well made in this actually is that role of the strategic partners in positive pathways, but also in that which brings us together as endeavours. Use Naomi, talk back through her, because her visibility across what all of us are up to is unparalleled, because she eats, sleeps, breathes it every day. And that's why she's out there truffling away, looking for opportunities of funding bits and pieces. But it's also where she's going to have a bit of insight to go, oh, you've said something interesting. You need to have a conversation with these people over here. And that's what joined, you know, the likes of Neil Heritage and us up, where we're talking about, you know, helping them accommodate something they wanted to do. And it's in the past, it's the Endeavour Fund that brought together. I mean, you know, we did joint activities with the Marcolite Flying Lunatics at Thruxton, and did something together and combined a pool of beneficiaries, and it had a disproportionately good effect for both organisations. So, yeah, absolutely, innovation and spreading out is possible, but you've just got to do it, making sure that you can do it within your means. Back to you in the studio. Sorry, Wisey, I've been dying to say that.
Over to you now, thank you. Yeah, so no, that's brilliant. And fantastic timing as well, Jim. This isn't your first rodeo either. You know, with only 30 seconds to spare, it just leaves me to wrap up, really. And in wrap up, I gave a few of the summary points across before we set up the panel, so I won't reiterate them here and now. But what I will reiterate is my thanks and our thanks as the Invictus Games Foundation to have such fantastic participants who gave their time freely and gladly, and their energy and experience and enthusiasm into this webinar. this afternoon. Thank you very much. Silent round of applause from everybody in the audience to you guys. I'm sure they're all clapping at home right now. And thank you very much for contributing. Thank you very much for everyone who's joined us. I hope that there was some takeaway points. Please feel free to email back to Naomi. Naomi's getting a lot of tasks. I'm feeling sorry for Naomi. She's on leave next week though, so just be warned of that. Please feel free to email any of those key takeaway points that you got, that you took away. And please, the final ask is please do fill in the survey that will be sent out to you as soon as we close this webinar. It will flash up into your in tray. I've been assured that's how the IT will work. So please take the 5 minutes just to fill it out, and that would be hugely valuable. There will be more iterations of the Invictus Games Foundation conversation. Please look out for them, and we'd love to see you on those future iterations. Thanks once again. Have a fantastic afternoon and enjoy the weekend when it comes.